3 weeks ago, Chinese monks broke a silence they had maintained for more than 1,000 years. And what they revealed about Mount Kailash is the most terrifying claim any religious order has ever made public. A 94-year-old monk named Chen Huimin sat in a candlelit room in Qinghai province, his hands trembling so much that his translator had to hold the pages. The texts spread before him were forbidden, manuscripts hidden for centuries, written in a dialect so ancient that only a handful of living monks can still read them. For 60 years, Chen kept what those pages contained tucked behind his teeth. Then he looked up and, in a voice barely above a whisper, said 5 words. "The mountain is a machine." What the texts describe as buried beneath Kailash is still active, still generating a force that warps time, destroys technology, and has killed everyone who got too close. It is the reason no one has ever reached the summit alive. The time warp. Master Chen pressed his finger against a passage near the center of the manuscript. The characters were older than the monastery itself, a dialect his order had spent centuries learning to decipher. His translator leaned forward, then paused, stepped back. Something in the old monk's expression made him hesitate. "Time doesn't flow there," Chen said finally. "It accumulates, accelerates, snatches away what you can't reclaim. Monks have whispered this for centuries. But in 1999, a Russian expedition proved they weren't exaggerating. Dr. Yuri Volkov had spent 20 years studying high-altitude medicine in some of Earth's most brutal environments. He had seen frostbite turn fingers black, had seen climbers hallucinate at extreme altitude. Nothing fazed him. So when his team encountered a group of Siberian climbers returning from the slopes of Kailash near base camp, he barely stopped. They had only been out for 12 hours. Then he saw their faces. The hair that had been jet black that morning was now flecked with gray. The beards had grown weeks longer than 12 hours could justify. The fingernails extended beyond the fingertips, and their skin, deep lines, sagging flesh, had the hollow look of men who had aged decades between dawn and dusk. Volkov documented it all in a private journal that wasn't published until after his death. He described their eyes as the worst part. Not scared, empty. As if something behind their pupils had been switched off. When his team asked how long they had been on the mountain, the climbers turned on each other. One swore it had been weeks. Another insisted it had only been, hours. They became agitated, almost violent when pressed. Here's the part that should worry you. Volkov ordered full medical examinations before anyone left the region. He expected altitude sickness, dehydration, maybe incipient frostbite. What the results showed, however, made him question whether his instruments were malfunctioning. Organ deterioration consistent with 80-year-old men, kidney function plummeting, liver tissue decomposing, cellular damage at the molecular level that requires decades of hard living to develop, all compressed into a single afternoon. Blood markers screaming such extreme biological stress that the lab technician repeated the tests 3 times because he assumed contamination. These were young, fit, experienced men. They had hiked up that mountain 12 hours earlier in peak physical condition. All of them died within the next 2 years. Heart failure, organ collapse, degenerative conditions that don't affect healthy men in their 30s, conditions that don't even have clear medical pathways in patients so young. The doctors who examined them couldn't link the deterioration to any known cause. The only thing these men shared was 12 hours on the slopes of Kailash. The monks weren't surprised. According to Master Chen, the forbidden texts describe a zone of influence that radiates 15 kilometers from the summit in all directions. Within that boundary, the rules we take for granted, the constant and predictable forward movement of time, simply cease to apply. Time compresses, bodies age, and something monitors the process, observing how much each person can endure before breaking. Stay with me, because this detail rewrites everything pilgrims have believed for millennia. The ritual circuit, the Kora, has drawn the faithful around Mount Kailash for thousands of years. Each completed lap is supposed to erase years of bad karma. Devotees have always treated that as a metaphor. The texts say it isn't. They describe a literal exchange of time. Walk the circuit and time shifts around you. Approach the summit and time accelerates violently. The mountain doesn't just age you, it steals something from you. Hours, years, futures that were rightfully yours. And it never asks permission. But the temporal distortion is only one layer of what's happening on Kailash. And what the monks described next made aging seem almost merciful. The unconquerable peak. No human being has ever stood on the summit of Mount Kailash. Not one. Not in all of recorded history. And it's not because the mountain is technically impossible. It's because something up there doesn't want you to get there. In 1926, British mountaineer Hugh Rutledge, a man who had already survived some of the deadliest terrain in the Himalayas, spent 3 weeks studying Kailash from every conceivable angle. Rutledge had stared death in the face on frozen walls of ice and kept climbing. He had seen men fall and never flinched. After 3 weeks on Kailash, he packed up his gear and declared the mountain completely unclimbable. But here's the thing. He didn't blame the ice. He didn't blame the altitude. He wrote about a feeling, a pressure that built in his chest the closer he got. An overwhelming certainty that the mountain knew he was there and didn't want him there. 3 of his guides suffered nightmares so violent they woke up screaming, clawing at their own faces. Rutledge himself later admitted that quitting didn't feel like a retreat. It felt like he'd been allowed to escape. That was in 1926. The defenses of Minwisantishas, the mountain, haven't weakened since. In 2001, a Spanish climbing team obtained one of the rarest permits in mountaineering history. Official authorization to attempt the summit of Mount Kailash. They were elite climbers, Everest veterans, K2 survivors, the kind of climbers who had faced everything the Himalayas could throw at them and won. They never made it past base camp. Team members reported sudden savage hallucinations, visions of their families dying, the ground opening up beneath their boots, shapes gliding through their peripheral vision that vanished the instant they looked back. Nausea so intense it buckled their knees, appearing out of nowhere and disappearing just as quickly. And beneath it all, something worse. A shared conviction that none of them could articulate rationally. A certainty in their bones that pressing onward wouldn't end in death. It would end in something from which death would be a relief. And this is what is truly unsettling. Russian climber Sergei Sistyakov described his own encounter in an interview that was later suppressed by regional authorities. He was trembling throughout the recording, chain-smoking, refusing to look at the camera. His translator said Sistyakov hadn't slept well in months. "My heart was racing for no reason," he said. "A voice kept repeating in my head, 'You don't belong here.' It wasn't my own. It was coming from outside, from the mountain, like a hand pressing against the inside of my skull." The instant he decided to turn around, every symptom vanished. Gone, like a fist opening. He said the relief hit him so hard that he fell to his knees and wept. Master Chen confirmed everything without hesitation. Ancient texts describe what they call the repulsion field, an energy that doesn't fight intruders, it persuades them, finding the deepest crack in each person's mind and opening it until leaving becomes the only thought left. But here's the trick. The texts warn that the mountain's defenses don't stop at psychology. The closer you get to the summit, the more the physical world begins to crumble. And the first thing to fail is always the technology you depend on for survival. If what you're hearing now has you hooked, you need to subscribe, because what I'm about to reveal about the mountain's effect on machines and airplanes is the part that silenced even the monks. Subscribe now so you don't miss it. Machine failures. Compasses don't work near Kailash. Not always, not under certain conditions. They fail completely, simultaneously, and in ways that terrify those holding them. A German expedition in 2015 took 6 compasses from 3 different manufacturers to the region. 8 kilometers from the peak, all 6 needles began to spin in perfect unison, not randomly, but in sync, as if something underground were sending a signal that canceled every magnetic reading at once. The expedition leader, a former military navigator with decades of experience, saw it happen and couldn't explain it. In terrain where landmarks repeat and the weather turns lethal without warning, a dead compass doesn't just slow you down, it kills you. Now look up. The airspace directly above Kailash is officially restricted, classified. No flight paths cross the summit. The public explanation is vague: environmental sensitivity, cultural respect. But pilots who have flown near the region tell a different story. Instruments giving contradictory readings simultaneously. Altimeters displaying physically impossible numbers. Heading indicators spinning backward. A complete blackout, total loss of signal, lasting exactly as long as the aircraft lingered closest to the peak, then restoring the moment they pass. Turbulence erupting in clear skies without warning. Not the slow, legible kind, instantaneous, violent, then gone. A commercial pilot who asked to remain anonymous said he'd flown that corridor dozens of times. Every flight, he said, something happens that shouldn't be possible. My co-pilot and I don't discuss it. Nobody does, but we all know it. And this is where it gets truly unsettling. Documentary crews have launched drones toward the summit, hoping to film what no human eye has ever seen. Most didn't get far. Some plummeted from the sky like dead weight the instant they crossed an invisible boundary. Signal gone, rotors frozen, falling straight down without even a wobble of resistance. Others returned with footage that engineers couldn't explain. Distorted images, frames where the landscape bent in directions that didn't correspond to any recorded lens distortion. Shapes flickering in the video that had no source in the physical environment. Dark, angular, present for 2 frames and then gone. A recovery team reported that a drone's onboard camera had recorded 17 minutes of footage on what should have been a 4-minute flight. No one could account for the missing time. A technician who supposedly analyzed 3 separate drones recovered from the area found no physical damage to any of them and quit his job the following week. He told a colleague he didn't want to see what the 4th one would bring back. Master Chen was unfazed when we described the accounts. The texts predicted it, he said. The anchor point generates a field that repels anything artificial. Your machines aren't welcome there. He paused. Neither are you. But wait. The monks say the failures aren't random. The mountain identifies what each person relies on. Navigation first, then communication, then the devices themselves. And it eliminates them in sequence. By the time you realize what's happening, you're already disoriented, alone, and fighting every instinct in your body that tells you to run. That alone would make Kailash the most hostile environment on Earth. But the monks say the mountain isn't just defending itself. It's watching everything that approaches, and it has eyes. The Twin Lakes. 2 lakes sit at the base of Kailash, separated by a strip of land. They are nothing alike. Lake Manasarovar, freshwater, still as a mirror, so calm it seems synthetic. At altitudes where every other body of water freezes completely, Manasarovar refuses. Its surface remains crystalline, undisturbed, even when the wind lashes the plateau with enough force to knock a grown man off his feet. The Rakshastal sits beside it, salty, restless. Its water is constantly churning, as if something beneath it won't allow stillness. A German hiker named Marcus Richter, who completed the Kora circuit in 2012, described standing on the strip of land between the 2 lakes at dusk. To my left, the water was perfectly still, he told a documentary crew. To my right, it was moving, agitated, almost raging, and I could feel a line between them. Not see it, feel it, like standing between 2 electric currents. My skin prickled, my mouth tasted of metal. I wanted to leave, but I couldn't stop staring. Master Chen's voice lowered as he spoke about the lakes. He glanced at his fellow monks, checking, weighing. Before continuing, the texts call them the eyes of the mountain, he said. Manasarovar watches over the sky. Rakshastal watches over what lies below. Together they have a surveillance system that has operated for millennia. Nothing approaches Kailash without being observed. He left the word suspended there. Nothing. At night, witnesses report lights moving across the surface of Manasarovar, not reflections of stars, but independent points tracing deliberate patterns. The water changes color from day to day, blue, green, and occasionally deep crimson, without any geological explanation. Photographs taken at the lakes rarely match what the photographers remember seeing. Sound behaves strangely, voices arriving late, distorted, or completely swallowed up. Even silence feels layered, echoes that refuse to fade. The monks say the lakes don't just watch, they test, distorting perception to assess whether a visitor can be trusted with what lies beyond them. Most people fail the test without ever knowing they were taking it. If temporal distortion is the mountain's weapon and psychological terror its shield, the lakes are its intelligence network. And every layer, every defense exists to protect what the monks say is sealed at the heart of Kailash. Something that ultimately explains why this mountain matters more than any other place on Earth. Impossible geometry. From afar, Kailash doesn't look like a mountain. It looks like something that was built. Every other major Himalayan peak bears the scars of tectonic violence. Asymmetrical faces, glacial furrows, chaotic ridges shaped by millions of years of geological force. Kailash rises with near-perfect symmetry. 4 vertical faces oriented precisely toward the 4 cardinal points: north, south, east, west. Clean edges, measured proportions, the kind of geometry drawn on paper, not the kind nature produces by accident. Master Chen unrolled a map, worn on the monastery floor, and began tracing lines with a speed that suggested he had done it hundreds of times. The anchor point wasn't placed randomly, he said. Look, one line from Kailash to the Great Pyramid of Giza. Extended, it would pass through Stonehenge. Another line toward Easter Island. A third toward Angkor Wat. A fourth toward Petra. The probability of these alignments occurring by chance has been calculated at less than 1 in 10 million, he said. The builders understood Earth's energy grid. They placed monuments at points of intersection. Kailash was the center, the control point, the machine that makes all the other sites work. Here's the thing. The Great Pyramid is 146 meters tall and took approximately 20 years to build. Kailash rises more than 6,600 meters, roughly 45 times the height of Giza. If the monks are right, it represents engineering so far beyond human capability that the comparison becomes absurd. Technology capable of shaping millions of tons of matter with geometric precision, built by something that understood planetary energy systems before our species learned to write. Geologists disagree. Glacial erosion can produce pyramidal peaks. Sediments fracture in straight lines. Symmetry occurs in nature. Fair enough. But even skeptics acknowledge that Kailash's specific combination, perfect symmetry, precise cardinal alignment, structural preservation over millennia, is so statistically rare that it occupies almost a category of its own. The monks don't qualify it, they state it outright. Kailash was built. The texts use a term that translates as the molded stone, deliberate design, not accident. And everything, the time distortion, the rejection field, the technological glitches, the watchful lakes, exists because the structure is still active, still functioning, still protecting what was sealed within it thousands of years before the first human civilization left its mark on this planet. And what Master Chen revealed next is what the monks have protected above all else. The Hall of Records. The monastery had emptied. One by one, the other monks had left the room, as if they knew what was coming and wanted no part in it. The wind rattled the wooden shutters. Clouds swallowed the peaks outside the window. Master Chen sat alone at the table, and when he spoke, his voice had dropped to something barely above a breath. "The texts speak of a chamber," he said, "deep beneath the mountain, not a tomb, not a vault." He paused, something entirely different. He called it the Hall of Records. The ancient texts describe a sealed space containing knowledge that predates human civilization by tens of thousands of years. Not mythology, not oral tradition, actual records, documenting where humanity came from, what we truly are, and skills we once possessed that have been systematically erased from every story we've ever been told. And the worst part, the texts contain detailed descriptions of what is to come, events they call the turning, a transformation of human existence so total that the manuscripts don't even attempt to describe life on the other side of it. The texts call it the seed of the next world, Master Chen said. I don't fully understand what that means, but every defense, every death, every strange thing this mountain has done to people who have approached it exists for a purpose. To keep the Hall of Records sealed until the appropriate time. We asked the question anyone would ask. When? How would humanity know it was ready? For the first time, fear crossed the old monk's face. Real fear. His hands gripped the edge of the table until his knuckles turned white. "We will not choose," he whispered. "The mountain will choose. It always has." 4 major world religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Bon, all identify Kailash as the spiritual center of the universe. 4 of Asia's greatest rivers, the Indus, the Sutlej, the Brahmaputra, and the Karnali River originates in the surrounding region. 4 rivers flow in 4 directions, sustaining nearly half of all human life on Earth. The monks say none of this is a coincidence. The mountain was deliberately placed at the point of origin, nourishing life across the planet, guarding secrets that could destroy it. Mount Kailash has remained for millennia, unmoved, unclimbed, unexplained. Governments restrict access. Climbers flee in terror. Scientists document phenomena they cannot explain. And now, the monks who kept silent for 1,000 years have finally spoken. The question isn't whether you believe them. The question is, what happens when the mountain decides we're ready? Leave your answer in the comments. And if this video had you hooked from the first second to the last, like and subscribe right now. We're going deeper into the forbidden. And the next video reveals what we found when we traced the geometric alignments that Master Chen drew on the floor of that monastery.